Hey guys, so I want to take a few minutes to explain how the Montana licensing process works, and it might be applicable to other states as well. I'll kind of leave some general information here, but this is mostly for people who are coming into the counseling field trying to navigate the complicated, messy situation of getting licensed. And we'll talk a little bit about transferability and that kind of thing too, because if you're planning for your future and you want to know where can I practice counseling and where can I not do it, and how do I get there, and how do I make sure I follow all the rules and guidelines and all that kind of stuff, that's what I want us to get kind of clear-ish about today. It's going to be messy and complicated, but I want to try and clear some things up. I've been answering a lot of questions about this lately, especially, but I've been doing this routinely, so I thought making a general information video might be helpful. So the first thing to understand, oh, by the way, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the process of finding the state laws, finding the administrative rules, which are two different things. So I'll try and clear that up here for just a few minutes. So the whole purpose of making laws in a state is to deal with conflicts and potential problems and to keep people safe. At least in theory, that's the point, right? Meet people's needs, make sure they have money, make sure they're not getting in trouble, deal with accidents and all kinds of stuff, right? Generally speaking, about licensing, the purpose of having a license in the first place is so that the government can have some sort of control over keeping the constituents safe. Like all the people that live in the state, they kind of look towards the government, in our case Helena, and they say, hey, can you make sure you oversee all these counselor people? Because people are getting hurt out here. We want to make sure they're not doing bad stuff, right? So that's why every state has a licensing board. That's why we have licenses. There is some difference between the governor making laws and the legislature making laws, because they have some, and there's a difference between them and the licensing board because they do two different things, but there's a hierarchy there. So the governor makes laws called statutes, and that's going to be important here in a second, that term statutes. They make statutes to say, well, generally speaking, we are going to make sure that all people in the state are healthy and safe, right? But the Department of Labor, and this is true, I think, of most states for the most part, the Department of Labor is then tasked with all those different kinds of labor out there. Some of them require licenses and some of them don't. If you're an electrician, we want to make sure they practice safely, like they're not coming to work drunk or something, and then making bad connections in their wires in the house is burned down, right? That wouldn't be good for anybody. Same thing with counselors. So the rules overseeing all the people, the government gives authority to the Department of Labor to say all these different professions need to be regulated. However, the governor doesn't know, and the legislature doesn't know how counseling works, and they don't know how to wire houses either. So they say, well, let's get some people with some expertise, and we'll call them the board of behavioral health in our case. And that board will say, well, given our specific nuances and circumstances and the things we know about behavioral health, we want it to look like this. So there's some overarching general administrative statutes, and then there are some program rules, and those rules are adhered to by the board, okay? So when we say, I'm a counselor coming in, getting my license, I'm gonna apply to the board because they know the specific things that they need to look for, like have you had ethics training, and have you had a background check or something like that. You're going to apply to the Board of Behavioral Health, and they'll do all like the administration process of like making sure you're okay to practice, and if there are any conflicts that come up or ethical violations, they deal with all those kind of things. But we need to look in two different places to understand this licensing stuff, okay? So the first thing I'm going to show you is, let's see if I can find the one I need to click on here. Montana counseling laws, and we're going to look at those statutes first and understand those a little bit. Now, I just wanted to come to some sort of search engine and type in Montana counseling laws as if I have no idea what I'm looking for, which secretly I don't. I kind of know what it looks like now because I've done it before, but for you guys, many of you haven't done this, and so I wanted to pretend like I'm coming at this fresh, because these are the search terms I might use if I were coming at this fresh. So the one thing you'll want to look for here in Montana, it's right here, and I'll show it to you in a second, but if you're in another state, like many of you are from Idaho, Washington, if this video is being watched by anybody around the country, it's going to look a little bit different. But most states, if not all states, they have these posted somewhere on a government website. So here, montana.gov. You're going to look for that .gov extension. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Wrong window. Okay, so this one actually brought me right to the Montana licensing laws, but I'm going to back up a little bit using these search, what do you call those? Links? Hyperlinks? I'm going to use those to back up a little bit. So all of the Montana Code annotated, that's the laws, all of those are right here. And you can see if you go down here on the left, you can see like Title VII relates to the administrative structure of the local government. Military affairs and disaster, I can read. Disaster and emergency services, how election process had, all that stuff to hear about in the news that probably attorneys use this stuff to work out the unique issues that pop up, right? If I go down to Title 37 here in Montana, and we're actually recently going through some reform here. This is October of 22. We're going through some reform of Title 37 to clean up some of the old language and make sure the processes are efficient and that kind of stuff. So it's going to look a little different after you see, if you see this later, but this relates to professions and occupations. So I click on that, and here's where we see that list of all the different occupations that the state says we need to regulate. We need to make sure people are careful because there's potential for harm here. So you look through all these, and there's, you know, pharmacy, podiatry, nursing home, speech language, all that kind of stuff. If you dig through here, Chapter 23 is professional counseling. So here we go. Now we're in the specific stuff that us as counselors are probably interested in. And by the way, if you dig through here, social work, psychologists are right here, Chapter 17. So if you dig through, you'll find the other stuff too for other professions. But I'm going to go to counseling for now. And there's some general rules. Now, this stuff is kind of hard to look at too, but this is where you go to dig through to find the specific rules about what you need to be doing and looking at. Okay, so what's all these things that I'm telling you, if you want to check those and verify, like, he's not just full of garbage here, he actually has done his homework, this is where you can go to do that. The legislature finds and declares that because the profession of professional counseling profoundly affects the lives of people in the state, it is the purpose of this chapter to provide the common good by, and then ensuring ethical, qualified professional practice, etc. And you can read on to see what these all say. This is where I'm getting that information and how I learned that this is the purpose of the state and how it works, okay? So I'm going to back up here a little bit and go to definitions. If you want to know some of the definitions about this stuff, this can be really helpful, especially like if you look at, well, let's see, how do you read this? Title 37, Chapter 23, Part 102, 1A, no, 1B. This gets messy here to look through and track what exactly you're looking at, but there is a reference system here that's kind of important. If you ever need to talk about this stuff to somebody, or you get in a situation where you need to sort of prove to somebody else that you're doing it the way you're supposed to be doing, you can use those references to talk about these things. Anyway, when you're talking about like things like assessment, or what constitutes counseling and what doesn't, the state has some guidance on that, which is counseling, treatment, intervention, which means those cognitive, affective, behavioral, systemic counseling strategies, techniques, etc., etc. It's very broad stroke language, but it does help you think about what constitutes counseling-like behavior or therapeutic kind of behavior and what doesn't. Because there are people in the state that call themselves counselors that aren't necessarily regulated in the same way. Like if people go to their local church to get some pastoral counseling, they want to talk to their pastor for some spiritual guidance, and there's a flavor sometimes of this will help you out in your life in ways that are similar to professional counseling, right? So when things come up and you're suspecting abuse by either a professional counselor, pastor, whatever, not saying that happens in churches or anything, but it does because it happens in counseling, professional counseling as well. These are the places where we can go to think about, was this counseling-like behavior and is this under the regulation of the state or not? Okay. So anyway, this is one place to look at those definitions. And then anything that's been repealed in the past, we don't need to care about that now per se. Okay, but if you're looking for things that you don't see in here, like, for example, how do I apply to get my license? Where do I go for to find out what the educational requirements are, how much do I have to pay when I go in to fill out my applications, all that stuff. The governor or the government of the state says, we don't want to make those kind of specific rules because that's stuff we just don't understand about the profession. So that's where we have to switch over from the administrative statutes to administrative rules, okay? And the language here is kind of important. There's a difference, but you don't need to memorize what the words are specifically. Just know that there are a difference between what the state requires and what the Board of Behavioral Health requires, okay? So I'm going to show you two windows here now, right behind me. One of them is the Montana Secretary of State, which is where these rules live, okay? The other one is the Board of Behavioral Health. We're going to start at the Board of Behavioral Health because I think it's going to be a little more helpful. When the Board of Behavioral Health has rules about specific to counseling, they almost always refer to the rules that I just showed you on that screen, and we'll go back there in a second. The general laws and statutes, the windows that I was just showing you first with the definitions of assessment and all that kind of stuff, those typically you won't need to look at as often in terms of just getting licensed and maintaining good standing with the state. So those are less useful to us, but I wanted to show you that they're there because they are important to the work that we do. So here is the Montana Board of Behavioral Health. I've looked at, I don't know, probably 20-ish different states and their licensing board websites, and all of them are different. You have to like relearn this every single time because just navigating to the information you need is just a challenge. And I try to tell students, they're like, oh, can you tell us how to do this? And I'm like, no, actually I can't because it's different every single stinking time. And so likely if you're not in Montana and you're watching this, you won't be able to just follow the steps here. You're going to have to I'm trying to give this general information so that you can navigate this on yourself. You're empowered to find these places yourself. Anyway, if I go to license information over here on the left, and I click on that, and I'm going to say, I want to find out how to become a licensed clinical professional counselor candidate. That means in Montana, you get, after you finish school, the board says, well, you're not going to be fully licensed yet, but we want to make sure we understand that you're seeing a supervisor and that you're getting the right training and all that kind of stuff. So you're under our supervision, our regulation. So we'll give you a candidate license to start. Different states do it differently. Sometimes you have a temporary license in a state. Sometimes you have just a different license altogether for that period of time. This is just what it's called here. I'm going to click on that. And here's a bunch of information. But we have this application submission checklist, okay? And this is helping us get to what do we need to actually do to submit an application and what rules do we need to follow here. This is what we're trying to understand here. So I'm going to go there. Oh, by the way, most of these happen in an online application system now, but we have a PDF here to look at that I'm going to drag onto the screen in a second. A PDF here to look at that's going to help us get some of the information we need. As you can notice, we're already kind of bouncing around from one window to the next and from one document to the next. And so it can get really confusing fast. What information led to where? It's just messy. And I can apologize for that, but it's not my fault. So take it out on me if you want to, or I don't know, call somebody else and complain. The one thing I will tell you that I tell everybody is that this is just inherently a challenging process because it's confusing, and when people get confused, they get angry. And when people get angry, they get less effective at accomplishing a goal. So the best thing you can do is just expect the confusion and try and keep yourself as cool as you can because you're gonna run into headaches. And there's many of them along the way. It's not just navigating and finding information, but it's also you'll be told different things by different people because this process is inherently confusing. You'll find people who say, I know what I'm talking about, and they just don't. And for one, I was telling this kind of thing to somebody the other day, and they were like, I thought the rule said this, and they found it, and sure enough, it said something different than what I said. It goes to show that this process is complicated, and none of us can really know all of it. So you have to find who you trust as knowing the best information. Which is why I'm trying to show you, like, this is where I'm getting this information from so that you can say it's not Aaron that knows everything. It's that the rules, I can go there and I know where things are and I can validate that. So that's kind of an important part of the process. I'm not going to go through all these steps because there's another video that I have that'll show you all the steps of what you need to do to get licensed in Montana. But I am going to show you, you'll see every now and then that the board requires, oh, this is the actual thing that I got wrong the other day. So this would be good to sort of find this out together. The board requires supervision by a supervisor who meets the requirements in ARM 24 219 421. What is that? I think that means it's a reference to the actual language that says here's what they have to, here are the requirements. So let's click on that and see where it takes us. Yes, please allow. Okay, so here's a screen that we've seen before. I'm going to click back to this one. I showed you this earlier just a second ago, and I said we'd come back to it because these are the rules designed by the board to say here's how we function. This is what we're actually going to get our specific counseling information on. I'm going to go back here. Oh, by the way, let's just go through this real quick. There's a whole bunch of information in here, and it's not all about counseling. So if you can see here, it's in small print. It's really hard to see, but it says marriage and family therapists. Here it says applicants with criminal convictions, which applies to any of these licenses. The Board of Behavioral Health actually oversees marriage and family therapists, licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, licensed addiction counselors. There's a few in this state. Different states oversee different things based on how they're structured, but it's not just counseling here. Some of these rules apply to all of them, and some of them are specific to counseling. There's the fee schedule for professional counselors. There is supervisor qualifications, which is where this other window, sorry, I cut my finger off, this other window above me, that's what that one refers to. Let's actually just go to that one right now, and you can kind of page through this stuff and get yourself comfortable with, because I'm not going to go through all these and explain what they mean, but I will tell you this is where you find them. So if you can get yourself here, this is a good place to be. Okay, supervision qualifications. Again, we're not going to read this whole thing, but it is helpful to look through here. So the question that came up the other day with me was, in order to be a supervisor in the state of Montana, after someone graduates our program, what do we have to do? So students come into our program, we help them find help find a supervisor, or at least help establish the supervision process to begin with. And we say they have to have a master's degree, and if you want to get licensed in the future, they should have a license as well. And there's a few other requirements too, but that's just generally speaking what we look for. And one of the students said, well, what does it mean to be a supervisor after I graduate the program? Because you guys won't be here to help make sure we have all the pieces in place, and I want to know that. And as it turns out, this person's wife wanted to supervise a student because she already has a license in psychology and has been practicing for a while in the community. He was going back to school to try and get a license so he can work as part of the family business or something. So they were like, well, how do I become a supervisor? So this is where they went, and this is what I've been to before, to find out what are the rules about this stuff. And now that I'm looking at this, I don't want to look through all of this while you guys are watching me, because I'm not going to be able to find the thing I'm looking for. But ultimately, what we determined is that you have to have, oh, here it is right here, actually. I told them that you have to have some specific training by the Board of Behavioral Health in order for them to say, yep, okay, this person knows what they're doing. They've been trained to be a supervisor, so they're credible. The other possibility is you can be out for, have your full license out of supervision for 3 years, and that's a long enough time to say, yeah, it seems like they probably would know what they're doing by now, okay? And that's actually these two things right here. Have been licensed in their respective discipline for at least 3 years, including any period of licensure as a candidate. And I said they have to do that and get training, and he was like, I think it says or. And sure enough, it says or. You have to have your full license for 3 years or take the board-approved training. So even if you've been out for 1 year and you're a freshly minted counselor straight out of our program, then you get your supervision hours, and then you get your full license, and you're like, bam, I am so good at this, even though you're probably not that good yet. My humble opinion, but even still, because it takes a long time to get really good at this stuff. But nevertheless, if you say, I'm really good at this and I want to supervise a student and show them the way, then you can go get this training, and once you get the training, then you can be officially a supervisor. I don't mean to be denigrating anybody who's doing this process, because there are other reasons why you might want to be a supervisor. for billing purposes. Maybe you need to bill a candidate and you're trying to grow a practice or something. That might be a reason. There's just not enough supervisors to go around right now. So in periods of need, then we kind of need more people to become supervisors, in which case we try to align people with experienced and qualified supervisors, even if they're not experienced. And it's just part of the process that you don't need to care about. But nevertheless, these are important places to get these rules. Okay, so we've covered the Montana laws, the statutes, and we've covered some of the specific rules that are overseen by the board. And just to repeat this is where you're going to find all the rules about what the fees are. You're going to find information about what kind of educational standards are there. Did I get everything I needed to get through my graduate program? What the state requires are going to be right here. And all states are going to have some sort of guidance about what they require, how many hours of practice you need to have, what those hours need to look like. All of that stuff is going to be in a place like this. Most of the time, what most students do is they'll come to the Board of Behavioral Health and they'll look for like a frequently, and I do this too, look for a frequently asked questions, kind of a cheat sheet, some way to get that information a little bit easier. And in my experience, some places will give you that information really easily and it's easy to find. And in other places, you literally have to just dig. That's why I'm making this video, so that you know you can at least try to navigate to the right places or have some foundation of what you're looking for, because you're just going to have to dig in here to find stuff. And I'm telling you, it takes a while. It's not super fun. I mean, once you find information, it can really be powerful and it can give you the ability to then make progress. But looking for it can be really challenging, and this is just sort of the digging, the research process, I guess, that's not the most appealing to most people. But once you are empowered and informed, and you don't have to ask questions to the licensing board, because sometimes they don't get back to you, or sometimes they give you information that you're like, I don't understand this. Or what often happens is you ask a question and they just copy and paste this stuff in an email and you're like, what? What does this even mean? I don't understand it. So if you can just get here yourself and look at the rules in context of other things, that's going to be helpful too. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. I don't know exactly what else I can tell you, except there's going to be some legwork here. You can reach out to the people in your schools, myself, if it's helpful. Find those people that can help you navigate this stuff and ask them. I know there are state boards who will not respond to questions and will not give you guidance before the licensing process because they don't want this confusion to happen, although that can be incredibly frustrating. That's what happened to me in my home state of Minnesota when I first started navigating this process. I was like, well, who do I ask questions to? And they're like, this is my professors were like, can call the board. So I call them. They're like, we don't do that. We don't answer questions. And I'm like, okay. So then where do I go? And my professor said, well, there's another professor who does this sometimes. Go ask her. And I emailed her, and she gets all the questions. So she didn't have time to answer all of them, and she doesn't have time to walk everybody through this. So she didn't respond to me. So I'm like, huh, where do I go then? And there's just like no answers. So you just have to like start trying things and make a bunch of mistakes along the way. This hopefully will help you make a few less mistakes, but nevertheless, you're going to make some and you're going to have to fumble through it. So again, I mentioned this earlier, be prepared for confusion, be prepared to make mistakes, be prepared to get something back saying, no, you did it wrong, and saying, okay, sure, let's just try and figure out a solution, let's get it right this time. The more you get angry, the harder it's going to be, and you will. I'm guessing, because people do. Okay, that's enough from me. I hope this helps, and I will talk to you in the next one. See ya.